And I think we're diving straight in and talking with our guest of the day. Now, Vicki Hollub grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, I believe, and got her degree in mineral engineering, I believe, at the University of Alabama, if I remember correctly. She joined an oil and gas company that was then acquired by Occidental. She worked on a drilling rig, so she has been in every aspect of the company, has moved steadily up in leadership positions in all her years at Occidental, leading the Permian Basin operations, leading California operations, leading U.S. operations. She joined the board in 2015. She became president and CEO in 2016. She has been steering the company consistently from a traditional oil and gas company into what she calls a carbon management company. She acquired Anadarko, toured that, shed OxyChemical recently, and now has, I believe, what she is calling, the ideal. I can't remember the words you used, Vicki, but the ideal corporate structure. This is the company that you want to lead, and so it's an exciting moment for her, and an exciting moment for us to be able to speak with her. So welcome, Vicki. Glad you're here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
One of the reasons that you have thrived in an industry that I believe, few people may know this, but it's actually dominated by men. And you have had the ability to deal with adversity. You've faced plenty of adversity, and you do it through collaboration and by being decisive, by making choices. Can you tell us a little bit of a story of your experience and how you developed that ability to thrive in a male-dominated environment with a lot of adversity? Uh, uh, what was your experience, and how did you become the kind of leader that you are?
Well, this might be an answer you were not expecting, but growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, you're either an Alabama fan if you're enlightened, or if you have difficulties, you're an Auburn fan. So
Uh,
I grew up an Alabama fan. Bear Bryant, fortunately for me, became coach of the University of Alabama before I was born and stayed throughout my entire college career at the university. And so, what influenced me the most in terms of who I am with respect to how I do things and how I think about even organizations was how Bear Bryant ran the football program at the university. I mean, everywhere he went, he was successful. And my parents were avid football fans and Bear Bryant fans. And so, from what he did with the football team, I learned a lot about how to think about yourself being the best that you can be. And so, based on those experiences and those learnings, to me, it's all about people, passion, and perseverance. And to get to where you need to be and to accomplish goals, sometimes you've just got to be willing to put in the effort and the practice and the whatever it takes to be a team. And that team can be it can be a football team, it can be another sports team, but I view organizations to be teams that need to be able to work together and that need to be able to understand why teamwork is so much stronger than individuals. And so, to me, those lessons learned from Bear Bryant were ones that I've carried throughout my whole career, and I was further strengthened in the way I deal with people in collaboration when my mother passed away in 2001. It had a big influence on me because of the fact that she really respected people for who they are. All people mattered to her. And the reason all people mattered to her is because she knew that everybody was somebody's son or daughter or brother or sister, father or mother. And if you treat people the way you want your family members treated, then you're always going to treat people in the right way. And so combining that, I think those are the two most important things, and in areas where I think I got the best lessons. Not that Oxy didn't teach me a lot too along the way. Learned a lot from the people at Oxy. I love our industry. I I love our company, and definitely in every position I've had, I've learned something. But you have to have that desire to learn something to get new experiences and new learnings out of every role that you take.
I love the three P's, the people, passion, and perseverance, and putting people first and recognizing the humanity in every individual, something that it's easy to lose sight of in a digital economy, I think. And bringing passion, bringing actual caring to a role, along with the hard work, rational, it brings together all of those elements of humanity, the rational and the emotional, the powerful and the purposeful. So thank you for that. Now you have been on a mission to give Occidental what you call the best portfolio you've ever had in two ways. First, in leading oil and gas production by acquiring Anadarko and leading the shale revolution, and then also to lead in carbon capture by acquiring Net Power and building the world's largest direct air capture facility in the Permian Basin. Tell us why those two goals and how do they connect to each other?
They connect to each other because for a long time, for more than 50 years, we at Occidental have been using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery in oil reservoirs.
Mm-hmm.
That gave us the ability to understand the significance of using CO2 to get more oil out of these reservoirs and do it in a very efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that was important to us, and then the reason we got to where we are today, is that we have a chemicals business that for years has been using potassium hydroxide and developing it, selling it, and marketing it as a product.
Mm-hmm.
And potassium hydroxide, we're the largest marketer of that in the United States, second largest in the world.
Yeah.
And what we did is when we realized that the United States had so much potential and the Permian Basin has so much potential and additional oil that can be recovered with CO2, we set about to try to see how much of that we could get out of the Permian. And what we realized is that there's not enough organic CO2 in the U.S. to produce all the oil that we could otherwise produce. So we started looking for sources of CO2, and we ran across a company called Carbon Engineering that uses what we market, potassium hydroxide, as a fluid to extract CO2 out of the atmosphere. So it kind of fell into our lap that this was a very synergistic opportunity for us to use our experience applied to their technology and use all of that in the Permian Basin, where we have significant infrastructure around the CO2 processing plants, along with the infrastructure there, pipelines, and also the reservoirs to do it in. So it was a perfect opportunity.
So it was a really an eco-industrial synergy there.
Right.
You had a product that's in abundance, and you found a technology that could use that product to enhance your own operations. Now, some people would say, well, you're just producing more oil and just making matters worse. But what you're doing is drawing more from the same areas. What do you say to people who say, well, you're just expanding oil and gas production by doing this?
Well, first of all, we actually produce oil to meet demand. We don't create the demand.
Mm-hmm.
The demand is already there in both the industrialized world, developed world, but also there's a need for oil and the use of oil in the undeveloped areas of the world so that they can ultimately achieve the same quality of life that we have and success that we have here in the United States. So what we're doing is we're actually creating a better way to get oil. And the way that works is that if you use CO2 to get incremental oil out of a reservoir, that oil actually is a net zero or net negative carbon barrel of oil.
Mm-hmm.
The way that works is that the CO2 that you inject into the reservoir to create the incremental oil, it takes more of that than what that incremental oil will emit when used.
Mm-hmm.
The way that works is that in the oil reservoir, you have these tiny pores where oil is trapped, and oil is too viscous to get out of some of those tiny pores. But CO2 can get into those tiny pores. And what it does is it gets in there, it energizes the oil and
Yeah.
lowers the viscosity of the oil so that the oil pops out.
Nice.
Also, the other way it gets it is that if, when you get oil on your driveway, you hate for people to pull in your driveway and drip oil all over your driveway because then it's there, right?
Yeah.
Well, what CO2 can do is wash oil off of rock or cement or whatever. And so it gets in the reservoir, and rock is oil wet, can be oil wet. So that CO2 can get it off of that rock, move it to a producer, and then we can get it to the surface and produce the oil. It's kind of like if you shake up a bottle of Coke or whatever, or champagne, whatever you choose to drink, you get this energy. It's kind of like that reservoir gets the same sort of energy from CO2. And
Yeah.
so the other reason it's important in how you get to that net zero barrel of oil calculation is not just that it takes more CO2 injected because that CO2 gets trapped in the tiny pores, but it also, you're then getting more oil out of existing reservoirs so that it has already the infrastructure installed to get that oil to market. So you're not having to go out and buy more steel and transport more steel and other materials to replace or rebuild that infrastructure somewhere else. So I believe the last barrel of oil produced in the world should come from a net zero carbon barrel of oil. So enhanced oil recovery using CO2. Our aim is to try to help that happen and to be the company that turns the lights out in the Permian when we've gotten the last barrel of oil with our CO2, because it's CO2 out of the atmosphere. So doing it also that way, the other important thing to remember is that we're reducing the CO2 in the atmosphere when we're doing this. And so what we need to do is we just need to progress the technology, get it to a point where not only we can do it, but others can do it, and we can have enough scale to make a better impact on the environment.
Now, how can the folks in this room help with this, with the vision of a net zero or even net negative carbon oil and gas sector? Is that really realistic? And what do you need in terms of policy and support so that we make it not rhetorical but real?
Well, part of the thing that has supported it here in the United States is 45Q,
Yeah.
which recently was enhanced through the Big Beautiful Act. And so what that's done is it's made the tax credits for use of CO2 in oil reservoirs on parity with sequestration. And so what we believe is that ultimately we've got to get the technology cost down enough so that we will not need those credits. But right now, those credits can go out about 12 years. As we've developed this technology and make it better through the innovation that we're accelerating with our carbon engineering company that we just bought,
Yeah.
where we're able to now get that cost down so that it becomes a commercial activity. And if something's not commercial, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And you never want to depend on government credits going way out into the future. But if you look at a lot of the technology that's been developed that makes our lives so much better, is a lot of those technologies had the aid of government subsidies in some way. And so what we are trying to do is take advantage of these subsidies that we can get in the near term and make a technology that will last, that will be economical, commercial for not just us to use here, but for all the industry to use everywhere we are. There'll be some places where it would just be too cost prohibitive, like some of the offshore areas, but onshore areas, we can build this direct air capture anywhere in the world. And the other thing that makes it kind of more viable than some alternatives and like getting point source CO2 is that you don't have to build pipelines. You can build the facility wherever the oil reservoir is. And so you can avoid having to run pipelines through people's backyards.
Speaking of people's backyards, there's a lot of difficulty siting energy facilities of any kind in the United States, and there's a lot of focus now on siting reform and permitting reform so that facilities can be built more quickly, more easily. At the same time, communities certainly have a right to their own their own interests. How do you look at the traditional methods by which oil and gas companies have acquired rights in communities, working with individual property owners, that sometimes go against what the larger community wants? How is the oil and gas sector looking at engaging with communities so that there is not just an individual owner or two that is benefiting, but the whole community benefits from an energy project?
Bill, you've got a really good point. What we believe is we should be able to make the communities better because we're there. We should put the communities in a position where they want us to be there. The only way we can do that is to have them see a real benefit to us being there. Part of that benefit has to be to provide jobs for local people, and to provide jobs for local people so that those people can strengthen the community. We also do things like what we're doing in various locations internationally. We're doing here in the Permian Basin, where we're trying to work on through a coalition of oil and gas companies, what's called the Permian Strategic Partnership. We're trying to make health and education much better for those communities, rural communities, and smaller cities where the healthcare and the education is not as good as in the larger cities. What we're trying to do is we've come together to make that better, and we need to do that everywhere. The community that we're going to be building our direct air capture facility on the King Ranch in South Texas, we want to make that community better too. So we're looking at the educational system down there and making sure that we worked with Texas A&M University to get some of our employees from that institution and make sure that we're doing things that will increase their ability to have jobs and to have good paying jobs.
Do you feel like in the years ahead that oil and gas will continue to dominate in terms of energy proportions here in the States? What role do you think that solar and wind and hydrogen and geothermal and nuclear and so on will play as looking forward 10 to 20 years or so?
I think that oil and gas has to be a part of the solution for a long period of time, not just in the United States, but worldwide. It's going to be a key to helping, again, those developing countries become what they aren't today. So we have to make sure that we produce oil in a way that where the emissions are lower, but where we have the capability to impact communities in developing countries. Here in the United States, we've done some modeling, and we feel like the United States could see peak production of oil, not peak demand, but peak production of oil between 2027 and 2030. And we believe that peak will be somewhere around 14 to 15 million barrels of oil per day, which is why CO2 enhanced oil recovery in the United States is so important, because we're going to need oil in the United States far beyond that. And to not be able to produce the level of oil that we're producing today into the future means we risk losing our energy independence. Energy independence is key for the United States to not only continue providing the quality of life we need here in energy at a low cost, but to kind of help with the geopolitical situation around the world. If you're not a U.S. Country that's not energy independent, would be a difficult situation, I believe, for the world. So we believe that it's important for us to do what we're doing, but we do believe that it's going to require a mix of everything, as you just mentioned, including nuclear. It's going to take renewables, nuclear. It's going to take SAF. It's going to take a lot of things, but a couple of the things that not very many people mention that's also important is we got to conserve. we've got to start thinking about what nobody ever talks about much anymore, and that's conservation. We've
Mhm.
got to make sure that we're building things that use less energy, that we ourselves are using less energy,
Yes,
and that we're trying to, where possible, reduce those loads. The
that is.
second, or the other thing that nobody's talking about too much, except I think here recently, Bill Gates came out with some discussion about it, and that's adaptation.
Mhm.
We're going to have to adapt too. We're not going to be able to reverse the impacts of climate. So as much as we're going to try to make technologies better, we're never going to be able to fully offset the emissions going into the atmosphere. So we have to learn to adapt. And so there are going to be areas, not just within the United States, but areas around the world where we need to help populations to become much safer by doing the things that will prevent them from being impacted from like flooding and storms and the things that are being caused
I'm
by
glad
climate change today.
I'm glad you're raising those two realities, and in particular conservation, where one of the odd attributes of our current energy situation is that we're developing these technologies that allow us to generate prosperity on a fraction of the resources that we once did. We have the capacity now to provide prosperity to people all around the world using tiny amounts of energy compared to what we have in the past. And yet, because of the way that we price energy, we don't have global network of carbon pricing and so on. We tend to just accelerate our consumption even more to fill the gaps as we become more efficient. How can we bring the business and the environmental community together on the broad issue of what we've called conservation, which is in a sense really innovation that drives down the need for energy?
I think that's going to require a combination of all these groups working together. And that's been, to me, one of the most frustrating things. I go to almost any event that I'm asked to go to that has a mix of people in the audience. I try to go to because I'm trying to reach as many groups as I can with respect to the message of trying to get realistic about what innovations and what technology will work and what we need to think about. Most of what happens to me when I'm going to some of the climate conferences is that people don't want to listen. I've been at two events. Um, we've been interrupted in our discussions by protesters who want oil and gas to go away. That's not a reality. That's not something that is practical. That's not something that we will ever be able to do. So what we're trying to do is get people away from that concept and getting people to the concept of let's work on the emissions. And if we just focus on working on lowering the emissions, or doing something about the emissions, like
Yeah.
pulling that some of those emissions back out of the air, if we can get groups together to focus on that, I think we can make a lot more progress toward things that we can really actually do. And if we could do that, then we could help take a model to the developing countries to help them better develop their energy sources, because we know they need to.
Yeah.
So if we had a model that would work and could take it there, then the world would be in a much better place. But we
Oh,
can't seem to get there. We can't seem to get beyond some of the, I feel like, misguided passion around just killing oil and gas.
yeah.
And we can't get past that into the discussion of how do we do it better?
I believe
And
the war mentality to destroy your opposition is an appealing one at the beginning of a campaign when you need to call attention to a problem, but unfortunately it becomes such a draw for media and money that it's hard to let go of it at the moment that it's time to actually make pragmatic progress. So we have developed with our colleagues here methods of proactivism where we bring together much broader coalitions. And that's what the leadership circle is all about. And we certainly want to continue this conversation. I want to ask other folks to raise your hands if you have questions that you'd like to ask Vicki as well. But I want to ask also, Vicki, if you could offer one piece of advice to the leaders that are here today from the environmental community, the investment community, the donor community, the business and civic worlds who disagree on means, but share the goal of protecting both prosperity and the planet, what would your advice be?
It would be just as I talked about. Let's get together. Let's talk about it. Let's put all the data on the table and work out the solutions. And what we've been trying to do recently, part of it through the World Economic Forum, is to get our industry connected to aviation and to maritime, because renewables will help with power generation. But what a lot of people miss is that there's a lot of use of liquid energy that can't be satisfied with renewables, not even SAF, because SAF, sustainable aviation fuels, it's first of all much more expensive than taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and creating a net zero carbon barrel of oil. It's much more expensive. And by the way, it's just a man-made combination of hydrogen and carbon, so hydrocarbons. So it's not anything different. It has emissions. So when we say sustainable aviation fuel, it has emissions. And when I'm talking about net zero carbon barrel of oil, I'm talking about a product that can create net zero jet fuel and net zero fuel for maritime. So it's a true net zero. So what we have to do is we have to get together and talk about those things. And we recently have had some conversations with aviation, and they've gone from the point of not wanting to, many of them not wanting to talk about it, to now understanding that, yeah, this is the better way to go. We've got to really look at how can we get fuel that is truly net zero, or can we get the carbon reduction credits to offset it? And thankfully, some of the aviation CEOs are so committed to doing the right thing that they want to create net zero barrels of jet fuel rather than buying offset credits. They want to get the net zero carbon barrel of oil to create that jet fuel. But either way, we're doing something that's better than what we're doing today. And we can't get to those positions. We can't get to those places if we can't have the conversation. And if people are still too focused on things that they think are really good, but don't quite understand, could be worse than they realize, and doing as much harm as some of the other things that they want to kill.
I know that in my background, decades ago, we would hear industry claims about something that was possible, and environmentalists like myself would counter that, no, that's never going to happen. It's not possible. And I shifted my approach at a certain point to say, okay, if we think that's possible, let's put the policies in place that actually lead to and reinforce that. And so we have been talking here at the Leadership Circle about policies that would help to actually create a net zero or net negative carbon oil and gas sector in the United States. And we'd love to continue that conversation with you. I am looking for hands from the audience, but I'm going to call on a couple of people that I'd like to make a comment or a question. So get ready. And I'm going to start with Will Grant. Will Grant is our expert on pro-activism. He is a brilliant practitioner of that. And I'd like, Will, if you can just explain to Vicki a little bit about what that is, and then ask any question that you may have about what we've heard today.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So, Vicki, proactivism is the idea of shifting politics away from being oriented towards opposition and trying to block or marginalize political opposition, but actually finding areas of common ground. And moving past the philosophy into actually building structures and strategies and skill sets in order to do that. And as I was thinking about your talk, which I found like a lot of elements really compelling to think about a genuinely net zero barrel of oil. I think, and I was thinking about like how to work with this question of environmental movements and folks in the industry. What I was thinking about is that part of what can be so hard in something like this is I think there's a lot of feeling in environmental movements of a history within the oil industry of kind of proactively shutting down solutions politically, like alternative energies politically. There's an asymmetric economic element to what's happening. And I can just imagine a lot of folks just wondering if they could come to the table in a good faith conversation, given that, and by the way, industries are not monolithic. There's a vast range of people who are within it. But I'm wondering what you would say in relationship to that in terms of the ability for people to feel like they can come into a good faith conversation with an industry that they feel has got a lot of negative history politically and environmentally.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. There's some baggage there, but while I probably it would not be a good thing for me to mention names on here, but I can tell you that there's a group in our industry, and it's called the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. We're not the only ones, but we're a group that is truly trying to find solutions that work. And so we're investing dollars in technology. We've committed to $10 billion over a 10-year period. Each company has to try to find the technologies that will make our world a better place. And so what that's included, one thing that's really important is it's included the technologies that will help us measure our emissions so that we know where they're happening and what they really are, not just making a calculation, but actually understanding that. So we're doing that much better. And the technology that we've helped to develop is now going around the globe, doing this in various places for those countries that don't have the technology or didn't have the technology yet to be able to do it or understand it themselves, and thinking that maybe what they were doing was okay, but realizing that emissions are more than we ever thought they were. They're not what we've been thinking here in the United States. The numbers are not right. What we're seeing from what we actually measure are emissions that are higher. And in places sometimes that we didn't expect. So we've learned a lot, and we're still trying to learn more and trying to apply the right dollars in the right places. So I think if you could come together, if we could somehow, and maybe through you, Bill, or others, is to find a way to get the group of people that have put their money where their mouth is, who are ready to try to make a change, and get us together with a group of people that can help influence as you said, the policies that will help us get to the right place and head in the right direction. We're committed, and we're building a 1.3 or $4 billion facility in the Permian to make this work. And for us to do that, we're not a huge major. We're about a 40, depending on the day, a 40 to $45 billion company, but we're spending big dollars. We've committed to make this technology work, and we're building it on our own dime in the Permian with about a $400 million investment to help make that happen from BlackRock. But that's a pretty big investment for a company our size to make that technology work. And that technology is key to creating the net zero barrel of oil. So we're committed. And there's some others that are spending money outside of the OGCI commitments as well to try to make sure that we can get to where we need to be. I live on the Gulf Coast. I live in Galveston. And I've seen my friends get hammered year after year, their businesses taken out year after year, some having to start all over. And now what's happening in coastal areas is these people who have lived where they grew up are now losing their homes. They can't afford to rebuild. Corporations are coming in and buying that land, taking them away from their home because of these extreme storms. And none of that is right. So we have to do something.
It's terrific to hear that, and look forward. Chip Cummins, I want to call on you. You are a champion of renewables, have been for a couple of generations now. What do you have to ask Vicki?
Well, hi. Bill, and hi, Vicki. Thanks for your leadership over there at Oxy. Very impressive what I'm hearing about your direct air capture and CCS program in the Permian. I'm the chair of the American Renewable Energy Institute, and I've been working with Bill and Trammell and some of the others on this call for quite a long time. And my question is, how are you looking at the energy that's required, the anticipated energy required to power our grid, our national grid that's got to accommodate all these AI farms and all the other energy demands that I'm told is responsible for somewhere in the magnitude of about 40% of the carbon emissions in the United States when you consider the Eastern grid, the Western grid, and the Texas grid. And I want to finish my comment by saying that I'm leading a group called the American Energy Initiative on the wisdom of implementing a high voltage direct current system, HVDC. We call that a super grid that would connect the country and address these issues. And of course, we're agnostic, so not much electricity is produced by oil. I realize that, but when we talk about oil, coal, gas, nuclear, hydro, and wind and solar, it turns out that solar is the cheapest of them all, with wind right there, about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Levelized cost goes to coal, to get natural gas at 4, coal at 8, nuclear 15. So anyway, if you wouldn't mind responding to that piece of the energy equation here in America, thank you.
Yeah, I'll say first of all that we like solar. We years ago built our first solar facility, 16 megawatt, not big, but in the Permian to power some of our oil and gas. So we do believe solar is critically important. But with respect to you said oil doesn't is not a part of the creation of electricity. That's right, except that the thing to remember is that about 20% of the natural gas produced in the United States is associated with oil production. So if you didn't have that oil production, we'd have 20% less natural gas production, assuming the same macro and all that. But that's an important thing to think about. The way we look at what to do about the data centers and how to help with that is we also are 40% equity owners of a technology called Net Power. And Net Power takes natural gas and combusts it with oxygen instead of air. That combustion process creates, first of all, fresh water and CO2. CO2 drives the turbine to create the electricity. And then a small stream of CO2, excess CO2, comes off the side that we could use in enhanced oil recovery. So we're looking at providing the opportunity for data centers to take advantage of the natural gas we have in the Permian, using that natural gas to create electricity for the facility with Net Power. Because the other thing that's not being talked about as much, at least in our area, about the data centers is they not only need a lot of electricity, but they need fresh water, or at least water fresh enough that they could use for their cooling. And so we're trying to look for holistic solutions that'll provide them with both the power and the fresh water to go with it. But I will say I'm super excited about what you're talking about to help the grid overall in the United States. That would be phenomenal.
George,
Thank you.
George Cummings, you are an expert on leadership, and you've interviewed and talked with some of the top leaders in the country. What's your question for Vicki?
Okay, so my questions are, thanks, and this has been really exciting. Again, Bill, honor to you for putting this group together. What a brain trust you've created. Vicki, amazing comments. So here's my couple of, I'm going to call it facts and reality. One, CO2 is the elephant in the room. If anybody does their homework, that's all the tipping points are almost related. If you ask AI, what's the 100 biggest things humanity faces, 75 are going to say fossil fuels. Something, what's the 10 things we can do? 9 of the 10 things, stop burning fossil fuels. So we are not doing that yet. But there's some other things like methane that we now can identify from space, know where it's leaking. One of the clients I'm working with has one client in Texas that has 75,000 oil wells that are leaking methane right now. And there's already laws in place that if those numbers are not right, there's big fines, daily fines. So there's a mechanism there that I see as needing to be addressed as fast as possible, since we're not ready to take our foot off the gas pedal. We're not ready to shut enough coal-fired plants down. Let's take care of methane that's 40 to 80 times on a molecular basis as a biochemist, worse than CO2, short lifetime, but worse. So let's address that. We've got laws for it. We now know where it's at. Let's just go make that happen somehow, some way. And the other thing is something that Vicki said earlier, that's what we tried to do. I'm part of South by Southwest, the creation of that thing. We at one time had South by Southwest Eco. We had Sylvia Earle and Shell Oil on the same stage at the same time. And I thought we had cracked the nut then of getting, there's common ground that all of us know. Clean air, clean water, healthier food, renewable energy. We all know that's where we want to go. That's where everybody wants to go. That's where we need to go, blah, blah. So 20 years ago, or a few years ago, we had 50 rights for nature lawsuits out there. Now we have over 600 cases as of UNGA last month. So, and those cases, New Jersey just got $800 and some million for New Jersey against big chemistry for this stuff they're doing.
Tunnel to the core point, George. So
that's it. Well, that's the core. There it is.
So
the cases are going to be happening at light speed against big oil, chemistry, pharma, all those bad players, big ag, all of that's coming. So and the precedent says they're going to lose all those cases like they did for seatbelts and cancer and blah, blah. They're going to lose these cases. Can't we all get back to Vicki's point? How do we get everybody at one table and say, let's set up something where you guys start putting money into a fund to fix the problems? Let's don't waste time. We don't have, nature doesn't have time and resources. So how do we get everybody at the bargaining table?
Thank you,
Vicki.
Thank you, George. And Vicki, what's your thoughts?
I agree. I completely agree. Methane is something that is much more, as he mentioned, much more potent than CO2. So we've got to stop that. But that's going to be a challenge. And we've already spent $60 million trying to change out these high bleed valves and controls. So we're doing what we can. Because of the way the U.S. oil and gas industry was constructed way back starting in the late, early 20s, we have a lot of things that need to be fixed. And rather than settling these lawsuits, we would absolutely like to put, and we haven't lost a lawsuit on that, I'll say that, but we would prefer to put money toward the solution rather than it going somewhere where it doesn't ever get applied to making our industry better and reducing or capturing the emissions. So I completely agree. We need a better way to make sure funds that are otherwise wasted in some of those court cases go directly to the problem.
So I'm going to ask a question. Whoops! Of course, it just went out of my screen here. But that Shannon McGuire put to you that's related to this, and then we'll go to Randy and John. What are Vicki's thoughts on the critical components of how she sees collaboration working across the different energy industries and the different environmental groups? What are the critical components of that collaboration, do you think, Vicki?
I think it's, first of all, getting what was mentioned earlier, getting the right people together in the right place with the people that can make a difference. I go to the World Economic Forum every year, and we've tried there to make it a place where we could all have conversation and we could make progress toward putting some concrete next steps. But we haven't made as much progress there as we have with, again, the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. But we can't sit there with as oil companies and as good as we feel like we're doing, putting dollars toward technologies that'll make a difference, we do need to get in a place with others so that we can put a broader, bigger plan. We need a bigger plan, and it's got to be there's got to be some bigger forum that can make that happen. And I think it's going to take very influential people, around the world to make it happen. We've talked about it. We've been talking about it for years, and we haven't made the progress that we want to make. That's why we keep doing things like we're doing today to try to get groups like yourselves, where you have a lot of important people in this meeting. And I've looked at the list and I'm impressed. But we have to go beyond meetings like this and get to the next step. And
Yes.
that's going to require, that's also going to require politicians. And actually there are some that understand. There are some Republicans and some Democrats that understand that there's an issue here that we need to resolve.
Well, we're certainly, and I want to just alert people to the fact that we will be continuing on this process after this meeting. So if you are interested in participating in a process that leads to collaborative solutions in this arena, do let us know, and we'll be reaching out. Randy McNamara, what do you have to ask Vicki?
Vicki, with regard to the methane, have you got a technological solution to reducing the emissions of methane?
It's all about what we can tell the technology. First was the technology to really measure it. And now there's technologies that we're using to stop fugitive emissions. Like you need to use different valves, you need to use different flanges. So there are technologies being developed today, and it is going to take the technologies to ultimately curb by a large amount the methane going into the atmosphere. The problem with it is that to stop all the methane going into the atmosphere, the funds that would be required for that and the technology that would need to be developed quickly would need to be quite inexpensive. And again, I mentioned that we spent $60 million to make sure that we were eliminating our high bleed controls and valves. So we're doing what we can, but as was mentioned earlier, in the United States, we don't have the prolific producers except in the shale part of the business. So some of the older conventional oil wells in the United States that may produce 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 barrels of oil per day, there's emissions coming with those, and to mitigate that is going to be very expensive. And so there's things that a lot of companies are trying to do, and we're making progress, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take decades, and it's going to be, again, pretty costly to do.
And one of the perhaps unwisest, well, there's a lot to choose from, but unwisest decisions. This is an editorial comment of the current administration, has been to roll back efforts on methane reduction, something that even folks across the industries want to do. So we need to move forward with that. John Steiner, what do you have to add?
No, I was not done. One thing I wanted to
Randy,
say,
sorry, go ahead, finish up.
I wonder, Vicki, if you were to take the stand, you as an executive and you as Occidental, saying we're going to create a conference, we're going to bring together all these petroleum companies, and we are going to find a line on a program to eliminate methane. If you were to take that on, that you could provide the leadership that would make that possible. What do you think?
I chaired the oil and gas community of the World Economic Forum for the past couple of years. I ended my term the end of last year. I tried to do exactly that. We tried to pull our companies together, and also it was Dr. Sultan Al Jaber with the ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, has tried to do the same thing. And so we have a decarbonization initiative where a lot of companies, I think it's over 100 companies, oil and gas companies around the world, have signed on to it to make it a goal to get to net zero methane emissions. I think the period now, I think is by 2050. But but we're trying to do that. And it's not everybody, not every company's on the same pace to make it happen. But this was a very momentous commitment by a large number of oil and gas companies to actually start taking the steps necessary to make it happen.
Is
So
there
I
any,
think
is there any reporting system to an entity to can actually hold people to account for their promise to do that?
yes, right now the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative has taken the accountability and responsibility to take down capture the data and to start making, holding us accountable. Now, the holding us accountable, everybody's going to have to do their part. That nobody's necessarily going to be outed, except we are applying peer pressure to each other to make this happen.
Thank you.
And OGCI has been a very it's been a good force, I think, over the years, and we'd love to see more, and we'd love to see policy that helps to reinforce that, so that we have a policy structure surrounding it to move things forward. John Steiner.
Vicki, thank you so much for being with us, obviously, and giving us a window into the good things that are happening that many of us just don't know about. And obviously, Bill and Vicki, anything we can do to bring those people to the table, we're here to serve you if we can. My comment is, we have a good friend here in Boulder, Colorado, who has been working with scientists at the Colorado State University to use biochar to cap orphan wells. And we have a lot of information on that. I think it could be a significant business. And they are literally looking for $1 million to go from basically proof of concept, which the scientists have done, to the first prototype. And is that something you would be interested receiving information on?
Absolutely, because one of the things that we committed to do is, where we can, is to provide a testing opportunity for people, companies, innovators with ideas on ways to do things better or differently. We operate in the Permian Basin, the DJ Basin, and the Powder River Basin here in the United States. We have operations in Abu Dhabi, Oman, and Algeria internationally, and we have Gulf of America operations. But to us, a prime testing ground is the Permian, where we have our biggest facility and largest number of wells. So if we want to try that technique, we'd certainly be willing to try that technique on one of our wells. We would, for our shareholders' perspective, though, we would appreciate getting some funding to help with that. But in terms of being able to help prove up the technology, we're there ready to help with that.
Well, and should you put your email or best way to contact you in the chat, or Bill, and Vicki, what's the best way to do this? For
Bill
others?
has it. I'm sure he'd be happy to send to you.
Yeah, we can make contact information available, John. So let's connect.
Anyway, thank you again, not only for your work, but for your inspiration.
Abigail
Thank
Rome
you.
has a good question in the chat, and I think this comes to, I mean, we are in a crisis with global climate change. There is understandable skepticism that we have the time to drive the costs for CCS down sufficiently to reach net zero. How long is it going to take to do that? Do you think? What's the time frame that we're talking about to actually be able to achieve what we've achieved in solar and wind with government support, driving those costs way down? Is that really possible with CCS, and how long?
Well, it is possible. In fact, the reason we bought Carbon Engineering rather than just license their technology is because when we realized it was using fluids that we make and manufacture, we knew that we had a good start on it right there, because one of the guys in our chemicals business, when we were first talking about this, he said, Vicki, I've spent 40 years trying to keep CO2 out of potassium hydroxide. Now you're trying to get me to find a way that will attract more CO2 to come into the potassium hydroxide. So we are finding ways pretty quickly here. And what's different for us, it took wind and solar decades to get to where they are today. What's helpful for us is that we not only are very experienced with the technology that carbon engineering has in terms of what it's going to require, because it's not just the potassium hydroxide. To make the process more efficient, you have to have diffusers within the contact tower. So we're going to have these fans that are about 25 feet in diameter, pulling air through a contact tower. To make that mixing more efficient, we're going to have PVC within the contact tower that causes it to diffuse and to mix better. And we make PVC too. So that there's synergies with that we have knowledge about. And so we have already very quickly been able to innovate, because we were going to build a 500,000 ton per year of CO2 extraction from the air. So the facility we were building would take 500,000 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere on an annual basis. That's what we were going to build initially. So what we started in the Permian, when we started realizing that we had the ability to innovate faster than we thought we would, we decided to go and build first a train of the first phase, 250,000 tons per year, get it going, because you got to do something. As you all know on this in this meeting, you cannot make technology better until you build it. And so that was our first commitment to go and build it. So now that we have the first 250,000 tons per year phase ready to start up the end of this year, we're building the second phase, which will start up next year. And we've already innovated. We've already been able to reduce the number of vessels that we need, and the process is going to be more efficient. And so already innovating, so much so that the cost of the unit that we build on the King Ranch in South Texas is going to be already 20% less expensive. And so that's critically important. Plus, we've built a digital twin to go with it, which wind and solar didn't have the benefit of. Wind and solar had to build and just test it, and then build and do the trials as they went along. We have the benefit of now being able to simulate much better with a digital twin, so that we expect now our enhancement of the technology and our innovation and our cost reduction is going to go much faster than technologies in the past have gone.
Well, we will look forward to collaborating and seeing how much we can help to accelerate that development process. Patricia Zavala, we need to let Vicki go. Do you have a quick question?
Yes. I will be really fast. I'm the executive director of the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus. We're a group of 60 bipartisan legislators that are building consensus for a sustainable energy economy. And we do tours. We take our members out into the field to see innovation firsthand. Would you be open to hosting some legislators to one of the sites, either in South Texas or the Permian?
Absolutely. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Vicki Hollub, I really appreciate your time with us. The fact that you would spend an hour with us this morning is a great testimony to your commitment to collaboration. We share that commitment with you. We look forward to partnering with you to assure that we do collaborate to drive carbon toward zero and have a mix of energy sources, both domestically and globally, that will nourish the environment and nourish people and circulate through the economy continuously. So thank you once again for joining us this morning.
That's great. And thank you, Bill. And thank you all.
Absolutely.